After a tragedy, Jenny, a dedicated teacher, discovers a secret left by her husband Edward, which leads her to fulfill an unexpected dream. While facing obstacles that seem insurmountable, an unlikely alliance emerges, showing that the power of love and compassion can transform lives in surprising ways. Jenny embarks on a journey that reveals that even in pain, there is room for miracles and hope. Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is the Linda's Stories channel. I hope you enjoy this story. Jenny had always been a dedicated teacher, passionate about her work and the students who passed through her classroom. Her life was simple yet filled with joy, shared with her husband Edward, a successful businessman who, despite his achievements in business, had chosen a modest and discreet life. The couple lived in a comfortable house on the outskirts of the city, far from the hustle and bustle of the centre, surrounded by a lush garden that Jenny took care of lovingly. Edward was known for his quiet generosity. Although few people knew, he dedicated much of his free time to volunteer work, especially with orphaned children. This was a cause that deeply touched him, and he often shared with Jenny his dream of one day doing something more concrete to help these children. The couple's life was following its peaceful course until one autumn afternoon, when Edward suffered a fatal car accident on his way home. The news struck Jenny like a lightning bolt, leaving her devastated. The days that followed were a blur of tears, consoling hugs from friends and family, and a sense of emptiness that seemed never ending. Weeks after the funeral, still struggling to adapt to the new reality, Jenny received an unexpected visit from Edward's lawyer. It was then that she discovered something that would completely change the course of her life. Edward had left behind a substantial inheritance, a fortune she had never imagined existed. Initially stunned by the revelation, Jenny spent days reflecting on what to do with the money. It was during a sleepless night, rummaging through old boxes of memories, that she found one of Edward's notebooks. In it were detailed plans for the creation of an orphanage, a dream he had never fully shared with her. At that moment, Jenny felt as if a light had been kindled in her heart. She knew exactly what she had to do. She would fulfill Edward's dream. She would use the inheritance to build and maintain an orphanage, a place that could offer love, care and opportunities for children who desperately needed them. With a new purpose, Jenny dove headfirst into the project. She researched, consulted experts, and began outlining the initial steps to turn the dream into reality. However, she soon realized that the path would be more challenging than she had imagined. The first major obstacle came in the form of Carl, the city's construction director. A middle-aged man known for his bureaucratic efficiency and difficult temperament, Carl seemed determined to complicate the approval process for the orphanage project. In their first meeting, Jenny enthusiastically explained her plans, hoping to find support. However, she was met with a skeptical look and a sarcastic smile. "Ms. Jenny," Carl said, adjusting his glasses on his nose, "I understand your enthusiasm. But do you have any idea of the amount of regulations involved in a project of this magnitude? It's not simply about building a structure and filling it with children." Jenny, although disappointed by the cold reception, did not let it get her down. "I understand, Mr. Carl. That's why I'm here, to ensure we do everything correctly. I'm sure that with your experience, you can guide us through the process." Carl gave a dry laugh. "Guide? Ma'am, my job is to ensure the rules are followed, not to be a consultant for private projects. I suggest you hire a good lawyer and an experienced architect. You will need them." In the months that followed, Jenny faced a mountain of forms, regulations and inspections. Every time she thought she had overcome an obstacle, Carl would appear with yet another document to be filled out, another approval to be obtained. Despite the difficulties, Jenny did not give up. She continued teaching but dedicated every free moment to the orphanage project. She hired professionals, as Carl had suggested, and gradually overcame the bureaucratic barriers. Meanwhile, without Jenny knowing, Carl's life was far from easy. His son, Matthew, a 10-year-old boy, suffered from a rare medical condition that required expensive and constant treatments. Carl struggled to maintain appearances at work, but at night at home, he juggled between taking care of his son and desperately researching more affordable treatment options. It was during one of those nights after putting Matthew to sleep that Carl received a phone call that would change everything. Matthew's doctor was informing him about a new and promising treatment that could significantly improve the boy's condition. The catch? The cost was astronomical, far beyond what Carl could afford, even after saving for years. The next morning, Carl arrived at work with deep circles under his eyes and in a mood even worse than usual. It was in this state that he received Jenny, who was coming to deliver yet another series of documents for the orphanage project. "More papers?" he asked, barely containing his irritation. "Miss Jenny, don't you think we already have enough problems in this city without adding another establishment to overburden our resources?" Jenny, usually patient, felt a spark of indignation. "Mr. Carl, this is not just another establishment. It is a place that will offer hope and opportunities for children who have nothing. How can you be so insensitive?" Jenny's words hit Carl like a punch. For a moment, he saw the face of his own son, vulnerable and in need of help. The mask of cynicism fell, and he collapsed into the chair, covering his face with his hands. Surprised by his reaction, Jenny hesitated. "Mr. Carl, are you okay?" Carl raised his gaze, his eyes red and tired. "No, Miss Jenny, nothing is okay." And then, to his own surprise, he found himself telling Jenny about Matthew, about the illness, about the treatment he couldn't afford. Jenny listened in silence, her heart filling with compassion. When Carl finished, she spoke softly. I didn't know. I'm sorry for everything you and your son are going through." There was a moment of silence, and then Jenny made a decision that would change everything. "Mr. Carl, I want to help. Let me pay for Matthew's treatment." Carl looked at her, incredulous. "What? No, I can't accept. It's too much." Jenny smiled gently. "Please let me do this. The money I have was meant to help children. Matthew is a child who needs help now. Edward, my husband, he would have wanted this." In that moment, something broke inside Carl. All the bitterness, all the cynicism he had cultivated as armor against the world, crumbled in the face of Jenny's act of kindness. Tears he had held back for so long finally flowed freely. I don't know what to say," he stammered. "Say that you will let me help," Jenny replied softly. "And maybe, when Matthew is better, you can help me with the orphanage." Carl nodded, unable to speak. In that office, amongst piles of papers and regulations, an unlikely friendship was born, forged by a father's pain and Jenny's compassion. In the weeks that followed, Carl and Matthew's lives were transformed. The treatment began, and gradually, the boy gained strength and vitality. Carl, in turn, kept his promise. He not only facilitated the orphanage's approval process, but also became a passionate advocate for the project. The orphanage, which once seemed like a distant dream, quickly started to take shape. Carl used his contacts and knowledge to expedite permits and inspections. He even convinced local businessmen to make donations, passionately arguing about the project's importance to the community. Jenny watched Carl's transformation in amazement. The man who was once bitter and cynical now smiled frequently, especially when he talked about Matthew's progress or the plans for the orphanage. Finally, after months of hard work, the big day arrived. The inauguration of the orphanage. The building, painted in cheerful colours, was decorated with balloons and banners. A small crowd gathered for the ceremony, including local authorities, volunteers, and of course the first children who would be welcomed. Jenny, standing in front of the microphone, looked at the audience with tears in her eyes. "This place," she began, "was born from a dream. The dream of my husband, Edward, who always wanted to do more for children without a home. But it became a reality thanks to the effort of many people, especially one." She gestured towards Carl, who was in the front row, with Matthew beside him, both smiling broadly. "Mr. Carl not only helped us overcome the bureaucratic obstacles, but became a true friend and partner in this project. He showed us that when we open our hearts, we can achieve miracles. Carl, visibly moved, stood up and walked to the stage, bringing Matthew with him. "Mrs. Jenny is being modest," he said, taking the microphone. "It was she who taught us the true meaning of compassion and generosity. When my son needed it the most, she extended her hand without asking for anything in return. This orphanage is a testament to what can happen when we choose love instead of fear, generosity instead of selfishness." Matthew, shy but determined, also wanted to speak. "Thank you, Aunt Jenny," he said simply, his voice clear and strong, so different from the fragile boy he had been months ago. "You saved my life, and now you're going to save the lives of many other children." There wasn't a dry eye in the audience when the doors of the orphanage were officially opened. The first children walked in, their faces a mix of anxiety and hope. Jenny welcomed them one by one, silently promising to do everything in her power to give them the love and care they deserved. In the months and years that followed, the orphanage became a beacon of hope in the community. Under Jenny's leadership, and with Carl's constant support, dozens of children found not just a roof over their heads, but a true home. Carl continued his work at the City Hall, but now with a new purpose. He became a tireless advocate for social projects, using his experience and contacts to facilitate initiatives that benefited the most needy. Matthew, fully recovered, became a frequent visitor to the orphanage. He organised games and activities for the children, sharing his own story as a message of hope and resilience. Jenny, although she sometimes missed Edward, knew she was accomplishing something greater than herself. Each smile, each hug, each small achievement of the children at the orphanage was a reminder that love has the power to transform lives. On a quiet afternoon, while watching the children play in the orphanage garden, Jenny reflected on the journey that had brought her there. The pain of losing Edward had never completely disappeared, but it had been transformed into something beautiful and meaningful. Carl, who was beside her, seemed to read her thoughts. "You know, Jenny," he said softly, "sometimes I think that all of this, the orphanage, Matthew's recovery, the change in myself, is a kind of miracle." Jenny smiled, her eyes shining with tears of gratitude. "Maybe it is, Carl, but it's the kind of miracle that happens when people choose to love, even when it's hard, when they choose to have hope, even in the darkness." As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the orphanage, Jenny felt profound peace. Edward's dream had not only come true, but had grown beyond anything they could have imagined. It was a living testament to the power of love, compassion, and perseverance. If you enjoyed, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment with a number from 1 to 5 to let us know how much you liked the story. Also, watch the video that is currently on your screen. See you soon.